How do we get it all done? Isn't that a question that all of us have probably asked ourselves so many times throughout our life? And all the things that we need to accomplish on a regular basis, how in the world can we get it all done? My name is Steve Cullum, and I've served in student ministry for about 21 years now, and I've asked myself that question so many times. So today I want to share just a couple things that have helped me as I manage my time better and hope to accomplish even more in the time that I do have. Welcome to Student Ministry Connection. Welcome to Student Ministry Connection, a podcast for those who serve in student ministry, want to get connected, and have a desire to grow. My name is Steve Cullum, and as I said earlier, on this episode, we're going to talk about time management tips. Just a couple things that I've learned over time that have helped me as I try to manage it all, because there's so much to do. As this episode is being released right in the middle of December 2022, Christmas season, New Year's, everything is right upon us. Maybe you're also getting ready for winter camps. Summer camps are like right around the corner, even though they're 6-7 months away. You're already thinking about them, and so much more. Graduation's right around the corner. I don't bring those things up to give you anxiety, although that might be happening, and I apologize for that. But I just know what you're in because I'm in it too. Like, we're all in this boat where there's so many things that are constantly going on. And I often ask myself that question: how do I get it all done? How in the world am I going to get all these things done that we need to accomplish? And sometimes it seems like it never ends. There's always more to be done. So how do we do it all? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today on this quick hit episode of Student Ministry Connection. But before we do that, I want to thank the sponsor of this episode of the podcast.
G-Shades is a youth ministry curriculum and teaching strategy focused on helping students see everyday life situations through the lens of the gospel. G-Shades has options to fit everyone as well, with 3 plans to choose from. This curriculum gives you the resources that you need to do what you do better. Do you need message outlines, a discussion guide, and a game? That's just $20 a month. If you're looking for a higher production value, including bumper videos, Instagram devotionals, and parent guides, that's $30 a month. And if you want an affordable, engaging video curriculum, G-Shades has you covered for only $40 a month. You will not find a better youth ministry video curriculum at that price point anywhere. Head over to gshades.org, that's GSHADES.org, to download Season 4 of G-Shades curriculum and use the promo code CONNECTION at checkout to receive an extra $20 off your order. G-Shades, seeing life through the lens of the gospel. Thank you, G-Shades, for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. You can find the link to G-Shades in the podcast show notes.
So let's get into time management, which I think is really the crux or the heart of why we never feel like we can get it all done. And when I think of time management tips, I think of 2 things that have helped me over the years. And again, I want to make sure this is clear. I am nowhere close to perfect in this. It is still an area that I struggle with. But these 2 things have really helped me progress considerably in this area. The first thing is delegation. We need to make sure that we are not carrying the load in our ministry. So who else can join you in making sure the ministry happens? Not only do you need to have your regular teams, for instance, like your small group leading team and worship team and tech team, things like that to help your regular programming happen, but you also need to be thinking outside the box in some other areas in order to delegate those things. So let me first talk to those who are pretty much running the entire thing. If you're one of those solo youth pastors, whether you're paid or volunteer, but you're doing everything yourself, I would encourage you to start praying strongly about who else you can bring on to your team. And I know it's tough. Some of you are in small churches that you're like, I only have like 20 people in the church that could help me possibly, but they're also serving in so many other areas. Who am I going to ask, Steve? I get it. I need to make sure that I'm not the only one doing it, but I have no one else to ask. This is something that's so important that we need to make sure that we are dedicating some significant prayer to making that happen, especially if you feel like you're in a place where you don't really have too many more people to ask or bring on the team. Your recruiting pool is very, very shallow. Make sure that you're praying about that. But let's say you do have some people on your team and you're not the only one doing everything. How much of the weight are they carrying? Could they be carrying more weight? Maybe some of them are just waiting for you to ask them to do more and to take a step in the next level of their leadership as well. So think about the people that are already on your team, and maybe you could ask them to step into some more leadership, whether it be to enhance what you're already doing, or maybe it's to help you in another area where you really need some assistance. Consider the people that are already on your team, and then think about who else you can be asking to bring on your team to serve in some areas that are not so obvious. Because a lot of us do think of worship and tech and small group leading and maybe teaching and those kind of areas. But an area that I didn't think I really needed help in was administration and logistics. Administration is actually a spiritual gift that I have. It's some things that come naturally to me. But all of a sudden, I had a conversation with a leader the other day that is even more gifted in that than I am. And as we began to talk, she began to show me some ways that we could really enhance what we're doing and take it to the next level. And all of a sudden, my mind went from living in this bubble of like, well, this is what we do and how we do it, to all of a sudden being blown in a lot of different ways as she's like, oh, we could also do this and this and this, and I can pull this off really quickly. And all of a sudden I realized I need to find other people that can help in this area and pass those things off to them so that they can do it well, but also take it in an area that I've never imagined it to go. So think outside the box. What are some other areas of your ministry that you do on a regular basis that maybe you're good at, maybe you're not so good at, but those are things that you can also pass on to other people. So delegation is huge. It's a key component, I think, in time management, making sure that you're not the only one carrying that weight. I would encourage you to do a full evaluation of your ministry. Look at all the different things that you do, maybe even list them. Something I've done on a regular basis is to just list all the things that I do, and you can categorize them if you want to, whatever helps you organize it a little better, and then start looking through that list and going, do I have to do this? Is this something that has to be me, or can I pass this on to someone else? Can I empower and equip other people to lead in this specific area of the ministry? And the second tip I want to share around time management is very practical. It has to do with your calendar. Some of you really like to fly by the seat of your pants, and you don't like to schedule out everything. But I would encourage you, try to step it up in how you schedule things. Something that I learned a long time ago is I enjoy being spontaneous, but I also enjoy structure. So I constantly have this internal struggle between spontaneity and structure. But I've realized that actually structure does help me to be more on task and to manage time better. Many of you are probably using something like Google Calendar to keep your meetings and appointments and all those sort of things. What I would encourage you to do is take a blank calendar, and maybe you could do this on your computer or whatever. It helped me to have a physical piece of paper in front of me and grab some pens, maybe different colors, and start mapping out your week. Start with the things that you know you have to do, like your weekly programming. Those are set in stone and you kind of have to do those, right? Maybe the prep work ahead of time, the cleanup time afterwards, those things that have to be done. Things like sleep are important. Put those on the calendar first. Put those have to things you know are on the calendar, and there's really no questions about it. These are things that will happen week to week that are mostly out of your control. Then I would encourage you to start putting in things that you really want to do, things that should be a priority, like your daily devotional time with God. Make sure you have that on your calendar. Set aside some time for some quiet time with God every day. Also, your family time is so important. Making sure that if you're married, you're spending time with your spouse. If you have kids, you're spending time with your kids. Make sure your family time is also on the calendar. Those high priority things that we really need to make sure that we're putting some significant emphasis on. And then start filling in the rest of the hours with the things that need to be done, whether that be the meetings that need to happen ahead of time before an event or a program. It could also be those weekly connections with your leaders. Maybe it's coffee or maybe it's a phone call, whatever you do to connect with your leaders on a regular basis and make sure that they're good, those volunteers on your team. Maybe it's your involvement in the community as well. Maybe there's a regular Christian group on a campus that you want to make sure that you attend. Or maybe it's your prep work. I have to make sure I put aside some time on Planning Center and ProPresenter every week to make sure that that's ready to go for our weekly program. Whatever those things are that will help you accomplish what you need to that week, put those on the calendar. Even if you're like, I'll be able to do it sometime this week. I'll eventually put my Planning Center stuff together. I'll eventually send that email to parents. I'll eventually whatever. Don't eventually anything. Put it on the calendar. Set aside some time. If you know it's going to take 2 or 3 hours to do some prep work for your message that week, put a block of time on your calendar for that message prep time. And that way it's already set aside. And so if someone comes along and says, hey, I want to do a meeting with you, you can look at your calendar and you say, well, these are the times that I have available, and try to stick with those as much as possible. Now, I don't recommend that anyone is incredibly legalistic about this. You need to have some flexibility in there because life happens, things happen. Of course, there are some things you do need to be pretty strong about, and there's other things that you can probably be flexible with. You're going to learn what that looks like for your own life. But I would encourage you, even if you've never done it before, put all those blocks on your calendar, block off that time, and stick with it. Also, if you have something like camp or a mission trip that's coming up, a big thing that you need to work toward, there's a concept called backdating, where you think about all the things that need to be done and then work backwards in order to get those things accomplished at a certain time. Put those on your calendar as well. Block off that time to make sure it happens so that it actually happens. Again, we don't want the eventual time on there. We want the time that we've set aside to actually do it. And what's going to happen is you start to block out all that time, and you're probably going to realize, like I did, that you actually have enough time to do most things you need to most days. Now, sometimes things happen out of your control that mess up that plan, and we have to be flexible and we have to go with that. Sometimes things like sickness will happen to us or to other people, and it throws off our calendar. We have to adjust. Things like that happen. But I've realized for myself that if I have those things blocked out on the calendar, I am so much more on task, and I don't have nearly as many times where I'm asking, how can I get it all done? Blocking out my calendar has helped so much. And then once you do that on a piece of paper, take it over to whatever digital or physical calendar that you use and start filling it in. And you'll find that I think you'll have more than enough time on most days to finish all that you have to accomplish. You know, I think the world is probably filled with so many time management books and resources that are out there, and you've probably read so many of them. I know that you probably have some other tips that work, so I would encourage you to reach out to us, share your tips, what works for you. You can do that on our social media, and maybe this is a topic that we will continue to revisit over time and continue to add more tips that have helped other people, specifically that are working in the student ministry world, because while tips like delegation and blocking out your calendar do help in a number of different careers, there are some things that are specific to student ministry. And so if we need to talk about those on a future episode, please let us know. Speaking of which, if you have not followed us on social media, you can find us at StuMinConnect on Twitter and at Student Ministry Connection on both Instagram and Facebook. And you can find me at Steve Cullum on pretty much all the social medias that are out there. And I would love to connect with you and pray with you, help you, hear your questions, hear your thoughts, hear your ideas, hear your tips as well. And if you liked what you heard on this episode and you haven't subscribed yet, I would encourage you to subscribe, but I would also encourage you to share this with another student ministry leader that's out there that needs to hear this as well. Now, I wouldn't necessarily encourage you to say, hey, you really need some time management tips and here's some ideas from Student Ministry Connection, but maybe share it in a kind way. Maybe you could share it by saying, hey, I learned a lot from this. What do you think? And let's talk about it sometime. What I do know is that time management is something that all of us in student ministry are always going to struggle with at some level. It was something that was a struggle in the very beginning when I was just starting in ministry, especially as a volunteer and as a part-time youth pastor. And I thought, man, if I was only full-time, I'd have plenty of time to do stuff. And then I found myself saying the same thing, if only I had more time. And there's really not much beyond full-time except for like dedicating every hour of the day to it. And that's the thing. We don't have to do that. If we're delegating and we're blocking out our calendar, I really do think that we can all do a better job in this area of time management in our ministry. But before we close out today, I do want to thank our sponsor for this episode, G-Shades. Thank you so much for sponsoring this. Be sure to check out gshades.org and use that promo code CONNECTION to save $20 off your order. Thank you so much, G Shades. You can find all the links that we've mentioned in this episode in the show notes. Be sure to check it out and be sure to subscribe. We're on pretty much every podcast app and service, and we're also on YouTube. So if you prefer to get your podcast on YouTube, you can also subscribe to us on there. We'll be back in a couple weeks for our last episode of 2022. Until then, we hope you have a very Merry Christmas. Be sure to stay connected, and may God bless your ministry.